The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I carefully balanced 2 coffee mugs, navigating around the creaky floorboard near our bed. Delaney was still curled up under the covers, her dark hair splayed across the pillow. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the room as I placed her favorite purple mug on her nightstand. I straightened my tie and watched her stir, a small smile forming on her face before she even opened her eyes. This had become our ritual over the past 3 years, me in my pressed suit, her still cozy in bed before heading to her classroom. Throughout the day, my phone would light up with pictures, finger paintings, macaroni art, or sometimes just her students' toothy grins. These snapshots provided welcome breaks between client meetings and spreadsheet analyses, while other consultants decorated their desks with family vacation photos or achievements. I had a growing collection of kindergarten masterpieces pinned to my wall. Last Tuesday, she showed me her latest classroom project, teaching the kids about families. She'd created a display where each student drew their home. In the corner, she'd added her own drawing, a simple house with 2 stick figures, one in a suit, and another surrounded by small children. The sight of it made my chest tighten in the best way possible. We weren't the type to make grand gestures or post relationship updates online. Our love showed in the books we shared, the way she fixed my collar before important meetings, and how I always remembered to buy her favorite mint chocolate ice cream. These small moments, strung together day after day, formed the backbone of our life together. I started noticing the changes in Delaney around mid-spring. Her favorite yellow sundress, the one with tiny daisies that always made her look like sunshine personified, hugged her curves differently. At first I chalked it up to the dryer running too hot, but then I spotted the same subtle changes in how her other clothes fit. Her face had softened, cheeks carrying a new roundness that made her look even more youthful than usual. "Someone's been enjoying the treats," I said one morning, keeping my tone light. She swatted my hand away with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The kids bring in so many goodies. You try saying no to 20 pairs of puppy dog eyes when they offer you their homemade cookies." I reached across our kitchen island to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, studying her face. The shadows under her eyes seemed darker lately, though she covered them well. Our schedules had gotten more hectic. My consulting firm had taken on new clients, and she'd volunteered to coordinate the spring pageant at her school. Each morning, she still sent me photos from her classroom, kids finger painting, story time circles, the organized chaos of snack breaks. But something felt off in her messages, a forced cheeriness that didn't match her usual genuine enthusiasm. I convinced myself it was just the stress. Between my longer hours and her extra commitments, we'd been like ships passing in the night. The changes in her appearance were probably just a side effect of our busy lives catching up with us both. One evening, while we were both at home, I couldn't find a pen to jot down my to-do list, so I searched through Delaney's purse, since she always had a few on hand. I'd been searching through there for what felt like ages, digging past crumpled receipts and loose change. She always had spare pens floating around in there somewhere. My fingers brushed against something smooth and metallic near the bottom. Instead of a pen, I pulled out a small heart-shaped candy wrapped in shimmering pink foil. The wrapping caught the light, clearly designed to be eye-catching and romantic. It wasn't the kind of candy you'd find in a classroom treasure box or drugstore checkout line. This looked intentional, almost intimate. The discovery stopped me in my tracks. Delaney had been acting different lately. Subtle changes in her demeanor, less enthusiasm in her messages. I'd chalked it up to work stress, but holding this carefully wrapped heart made my stomach twist. I waited until after dinner to bring it up, watching her load the dishwasher. "Hey! I found this in your purse earlier when I was looking for a pen." I placed the candy on the counter between us. Delaney glanced over, her hands still sudsy from the dishes. A smile spread across her face, the kind I'd seen countless times when she talked about her students. "Oh, that's from one of my students. You know how they love giving me treats." Her response seemed natural enough, the same warm tone she always used when sharing classroom stories. But something felt off. Maybe it was the weight of all those small changes I'd noticed lately, or the way that candy seemed too sophisticated for a 5-year-old's taste. The doubt crept in like a shadow, making me question things I'd never questioned before. I left the candy on the table, unable to shake the feeling that there was more to this story than classroom generosity. Days later, I was doing our usual weekend cleanup, sorting through the mess that builds up over busy weeks. I decided to help Delaney out and put some of her freshly dried laundry into a drawer. When I opened it, deep in there, a shoebox caught my eye. It wasn't like Delaney to keep shoes in a dresser drawer. Right away, I realized that in that box was something I wasn't supposed to see. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. The lid slid off easily, revealing a stack of cards nestled in tissue paper. Not birthday cards or holiday cards. These were different. Small, ornate things with gold trim and handwritten messages inside. I picked one up, the paper thick and expensive between my fingers. "You deserve sweetness in every bite." Another card, "Thinking of you makes my day brighter." Each signed with a simple H. The room spun for a moment as my mind connected the dots. H. Harland. That overly friendly cook from the kindergarten. The way he'd lean in close during school events, touching her arm while laughing at his own jokes. How he'd wave at me with that smug grin like we shared some secret. I sat on the edge of the bed, cards scattered around me. 3 years of morning coffees and loving texts suddenly felt hollow. Those recent changes in Delaney, the weight gain she blamed on classroom snacks, the distracted responses to my messages, everything shifted into sharp, painful focus. When Delaney came home that evening, I had the box waiting on the kitchen counter. She froze in the doorway, keys still in hand. "Want to explain these?" A flush crept up her neck, staining her cheeks pink. For a split second, her eyes went wide with what looked like panic. Then she laughed. That high, nervous sound I'd never heard from her before. "Oh, Merritt, those are from the kids. Don't be ridiculous." The words came out too fast, too practiced, like she'd rehearsed this explanation, waiting for the day I'd find them. My stomach churned as she bustled around the kitchen, chattering about her day like nothing was wrong. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think I was reading too much into some innocent classroom activity. But the gnawing doubt had already taken root, feeding on every suspicious moment I'd noticed over the past months. I was working from home that day, reviewing monthly projections when I heard the front door open hours earlier than usual. Delaney trudged in, her tote bag dragging on the floor instead of perched on her shoulder like normal. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, which were puffy and rimmed with red. "Hey, you're home early!" I closed my laptop and stood up from the kitchen table. "Everything okay?" She dropped her bag by the door and forced a smile. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened as she sat down across from me, fidgeting with her wedding ring. The afternoon sun streaming through our kitchen window cast harsh shadows across her face. "I'm leaving my job at the school." The words hung in the air between us. This was the last thing I'd expected. Teaching wasn't just Delaney's career. It was her calling. She'd spend hours telling me about her students' achievements, decorating her classroom on weekends, planning creative projects. "What brought this on? Did something happen?" "I'm just burned out. Need a change." She stared at her hands. "Maybe try something different. Explore other opportunities." Her voice wavered on the last word. The vague explanation felt rehearsed, hollow. This was the woman who'd stayed up late making personalized birthday cards for 25 kindergartners, who came home covered in glitter and beaming about breakthrough moments with struggling students. I wanted to press further to understand the real reason behind this sudden decision. The cards from H flashed in my mind, but looking at her fragile expression, the way her shoulders curved inward protectively, I couldn't bring myself to push. Whatever you think is best. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. You know I'll support you. She nodded quickly and stood up, mumbling something about taking a shower. I watched her disappear upstairs, leaving her tote bag forgotten by the door. About a week after Delaney quit, I was heading home from a quick grocery run when I spotted Sarah, one of our neighbors whose kid goes to Delaney's school, walking her dog. She waved me down, her face tight with concern. Merritt, I need to tell you something. My chest tightened as she pulled me aside, away from the sidewalk. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The other moms are talking. Delaney and that cook, Harlan, they were caught together. Multiple times. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the nearby fence to steady myself. The administration found them in supply closets, staying late after hours. That's why she left so suddenly. They gave her the option to resign before things got messy. Blood rushed in my ears. The candy wrapper crinkled in my memory. That fancy heart-shaped chocolate I'd found in her purse. The cards signed with H, hidden in that shoebox. Her weight gain from all those classroom treats. The growing distance, the hollow smiles, the rehearsed excuses about burnout. I'm so sorry. Sarah touched my arm. I thought you should hear it from someone who cares, not through gossip. I nodded mechanically, unable to form words. 3 years of marriage collapsed into a series of warning signs I'd chosen to ignore. While I'd been bringing her coffee every morning, believing in our simple, steady love, she'd been sneaking around with the charming cook who made those decadent treats she couldn't resist. My stomach churned. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. Every late night at work, every distant kiss, every half-hearted message. I'd been such a fool. Sarah squeezed my shoulder one last time before walking away, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of truth. I stood there for a little bit, and then went home. When I heard Delaney's key in the lock, my chest tightened. She walked in, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. For a moment, I just watched her set down her purse and slip off her shoes. Such a familiar routine that now felt like a stranger's performance. Oh. The kitchen air grew thick with tension as she noticed me standing there. Her eyes darted to the clock, probably wondering why I was home so early. I heard about you and Harlan, I said, my voice coming out colder than I'd ever heard it. The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But then something shifted in her expression. That same look she had when she told me about quitting her job. That's ridiculous, she stammered. Who told you that? People just love to spread rumors. Oh, my jaw clenched. Even now, even with everything laid bare, she was still trying to lie. The cards, the candy, the weight gain from all those special treats he'd make just for her, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Please, she continued, her voice trembling, I already told you why I left. I wasn't happy there anymore. The pressure, the workload. The only thing you weren't happy with was me, I snapped, the words tasting like bile in my mouth. I couldn't stand to look at her face another second, couldn't bear to watch her craft another lie. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing in the kitchen, with her rehearsed excuses dying on her lips. I didn't talk to her anymore, even though she kept begging to have a conversation. It took me a couple days to pack my stuff and book a hotel for myself. The familiar corporate smell of laundered sheets and air conditioning felt more like home than our house did now. Each morning I'd wake up expecting this to be just a nightmare. But reality would hit me again. My wife had betrayed everything we built together. The divorce papers sat heavy in my briefcase for 2 days before I finally had them delivered. My lawyer advised against direct contact, so I had a courier handle it. Part of me wanted to see her face when she received them, but I knew seeing her would only weaken my resolve. The hotel room became my sanctuary and prison. I'd sit there after work, staring at the generic art on the walls, wondering how I missed the signs, the weight gain, the mysterious candy, the cards, all puzzle pieces I'd refused to put together. My wedding ring felt foreign on my finger now, like it belonged to someone else's life. Delaney showed up at my office one afternoon. I saw her through the glass walls, mascara streaked down her face, clutching what looked like the divorce papers. My assistant, bless her, turned her away without my instruction. I sat frozen at my desk watching Delaney's shoulders shake as she walked back to the elevator. That night, I finally took off my ring. The pale band of skin underneath told its own story of endings and broken promises. I dropped it into the hotel safe, along with the photos from my wallet and every other reminder of the life we'd shared. Living alone in my new apartment, I tried to keep my mind occupied with work and building a new routine. But news about Delaney still found its way to me, like water seeping through cracks I couldn't seal. Sarah, who remained one of our mutual connections, dropped by my office one afternoon. She hesitated before sharing what she'd heard. Delaney and Harlan had moved in together barely a month after our divorce was finalized. The speed of it confirmed what I'd suspected. Their relationship had been far more established than I'd initially thought. But it was at a coffee shop near my old neighborhood where I first noticed the changes. Through the window, I spotted Delaney struggling to squeeze into one of the outdoor chairs. Her once-trimmed figure had expanded significantly, her clothes straining against new curves. She was with Harlan, who was arranging an array of pastries and treats across their small table with an unsettling enthusiasm. The woman I passed in the grocery store 6 months later barely resembled my ex-wife. Delaney's face had rounded significantly, her confident stride replaced by a labored walk. She didn't notice me as she followed Harlan, who was loading their cart with rich foods and decadent desserts. I ducked into another aisle, feeling a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Sarah later confirmed what others had hinted at. Harlan had a history of this behavior. He specifically pursued women he could influence this way, using food as both control and obsession. Delaney, who'd once been so particular about her appearance and health, had become his latest project. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, seeing her choices lead to such visible consequences. But mostly, I felt a distant sort of pity mixed with disgust. The vibrant, energetic woman who taught kindergarten was disappearing beneath layers of Harlan's influence, both literally and figuratively. She'd chosen this path, exchanging our life together for his twisted version of love. I archived the last photos of us together and blocked her on social media. Whatever was happening to Delaney now was no longer my concern. She'd made her choice, and I needed to make mine, to move forward without looking back. I hadn't seen Delaney in over a year when Sarah called me about her condition. She'd ballooned to an unrecognizable size, barely able to leave the apartment she shared with Harlan. Each time Sarah visited, there were more empty takeout containers, more elaborate desserts in the fridge. Harlan had turned their home into a feeding station. The last time I glimpsed Delaney at the grocery store, she could still walk, though she struggled. The woman I married, who used to dance around our kitchen and chase kids on the playground, could barely stand without help. Sarah kept me updated on Delaney's downward spiral, though I never asked for details. Harlan had complete control over her life, her meals, her schedule, even who she could see. He'd isolated her from everyone except himself. Then, when she became too dependent, too heavy to function, he out of nowhere had simply walked away, left her for some waitress at his new restaurant. I received a call from social services about Delaney's placement in Oakwood Care Center. They needed her medical history, and she gave them my number for some reason. Maybe she wanted me to know what happened, to feel sorry for her. It wouldn't work anymore. I directed them to her parents, who'd washed their hands of the situation months ago. The social worker sounded defeated, explaining how Delaney could barely move, how she needed round-the-clock care just to stay clean and fed. A letter arrived at my office 3 months after her admission to Oakwood. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope, though it was shakier than before. The pages inside were filled with apologies, explanations about how Harlan had manipulated her, how she'd lost herself. She wrote about missing her old life, her students, me. I dropped the letter in my desk drawer without responding. The woman who wrote that letter wasn't my Delaney anymore. My Delaney had died the day she chose Harlan over our marriage, over herself. Too bad she seemingly needed my help now. I was not interested in any kind of reconciliation with Delaney. I filed away her medical bills and paperwork in a folder marked past due, just another remnant of a life I no longer recognized as mine. I met Fiona at a client meeting where she presented her marketing strategy for a tech startup. Her confident delivery and quick thinking during the Q&A caught my attention. Not in a romantic way at first. I just appreciated how she handled herself professionally. We kept running into each other at industry events. One evening, after a particularly long conference, we ended up grabbing dinner at a small Italian place nearby. Fiona shared stories about her travels, her close relationship with her sister, and even her failed attempts at learning to cook. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just honest conversation. Weeks turned into months of casual meetups. When I mentioned Delaney during one of our coffee breaks, Fiona listened without judgment. She didn't try to fix things or offer empty platitudes. Instead, she shared her own experience with a college boyfriend who'd betrayed her trust. Her vulnerability made it easier for me to open up about my own wounds. What struck me most about Fiona was her transparency. If she was having a rough day, she'd say it. If something excited her, her whole face would light up. No guessing games, no hidden meanings to decipher. During a weekend hike, I found myself telling Fiona things I'd forgotten about myself. Old dreams, silly fears, random memories from childhood. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made me think deeper about who I was beyond my divorce story. With Fiona, I finally felt secure, seen, and happy. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Sarah's text arrived. Delaney had passed away at the care facility, a mixture of health complications from the weight gain and depression she'd explained in the follow-up call. I sat back in my office chair, letting the news sink in. The weight that had been lingering in my chest these past years finally lifted. Not joy, not sadness, just release. Like setting down a heavy box I'd been carrying for too long. I touched my desk drawer where I kept her last letter, still unopened. That evening, I took Fiona to our favorite rooftop restaurant. The city lights twinkled below us like scattered stars. She wore that green dress I loved, her red hair catching the golden sunset. We'd been dating for 2 years now, building something real and honest. I reached across the table and took her hand. The ring box felt warm in my pocket where I'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Now, with the last threads of my past life finally severed, I knew it was time. "Fiona," I said, getting down on one knee. "You brought light back into my life when I thought I'd lost my way. Will you marry me?" Her eyes welled up as she nodded, pulling me into a tight embrace. The other diners applauded, but I barely noticed. All I could see was her smile, bright and true. We got married in spring, a small ceremony with close friends and family. As we exchanged vows, I felt nothing but certainty. This was real love, built on trust, respect, and honesty. No dark corners, no unspoken words. Every morning now, I wake up next to Fiona feeling grateful. We have our routines. She brings me coffee, I cook breakfast. Simple moments that mean everything. This is what happiness should feel like, clear and uncomplicated, like morning sunlight through clean windows. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment on the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have any similar stories to share, leave them in the comments and we'll make sure to bring them to life. Thanks for watching.